For years, we faced charges of hypocrisy from those who do not enjoy the freedoms that they hear us espouse. And so to them, we must squarely acknowledge that, yes, we have enduring interests in the region to fight terror, sometimes with partners who may not be perfect, to protect against disruptions in the world's energy supply. But we must also insist that we reject as false the choice between our interests and our ideals, between stability and democracy. For our idealism is rooted in the realities of history, that repression offers only the false promise of stability, that societies are more successful when their citizens are free, and that democracies are the closest allies we have. It is that truth that guides our action in Libya. It would have been easy at the outset of the crackdown in Libya to say that none of this was our business, that a nation's sovereignty is more important than the slaughter of civilians within its borders. That argument carries weight with some. But we are different. We embrace a broader responsibility. And while we cannot stop every injustice, there are circumstances that cut through our caution. When a leader is threatening to massacre his people, and the international community is calling for action. That's why we stopped a massacre in Libya. And we will not relent until the people of Libya are protected and the shadow of tyranny is lifted. We will proceed with humility and the knowledge that we cannot dictate every outcome abroad. Ultimately, freedom must be won by the people themselves, not imposed from without. But we can and must stand with those who so struggle, because we have always believed that the future of our children and grandchildren will be better if other people's children and grandchildren are more prosperous and more free. From the beaches of Normandy to the Balkans to Benghazi. That is our interests and our ideals. And if we fail to meet that responsibility, who would take our place? And what kind of world would we pass on? Our action, our leadership, is essential to the cause of human dignity. And so we must act and lead with confidence in our ideals and an abiding faith in the character of our people who sent us all here today. For there is one final quality that I believe makes the United States and the United Kingdom indispensable to this moment in history. And that is how we define ourselves as nations. Unlike most countries in the world, we do not define citizenship based on race or ethnicity. Being American or British is not about belonging to a certain group. It's about believing in a certain set of ideals. The rights of individuals, the rule of law. That is why we hold incredible diversity within our borders. That's why there are people around the world right now who believe that if they come to America, if they come to New York, if they come to London, if they work hard, they can pledge allegiance to our flag and call themselves Americans. If they come to England, they can make a new life for themselves and can sing "God Save the Queen" just like any other citizen. Yes, our diversity can lead to tension. And throughout our history, there have been heated debates about immigration and assimilation in both of our countries. But even as these debates can be difficult, we fundamentally recognize that our patchwork heritage is an enormous strength. That in a world which will only grow smaller and more interconnected, the example of our two nations says it is possible for people to be united by their ideas instead of divided by their differences. It is possible for hearts to change and old hatreds to pass. That it's possible for the sons and daughters of former colonies to sit here as members of this great parliament, and for the grandson of a Kenyan who served as a cook in the British Army to stand before you as President of the United States. That is what defines us. That is why the young men and women in the streets of Damascus and Cairo still reach for the rights our citizens enjoy, even if they sometimes differ with our policies. As two of the most powerful nations in the history of the world, we must always remember that the true source of our influence hasn't just been the size of our economies, or the reach of our militaries, or the land that we've claimed. It has been the values that we must never waver in defending around the world. The idea that all beings are endowed by our Creator with certain rights that cannot be denied. That is what forged our bond in the fire of war. A bond made manifest by the friendship between two of our greatest leaders. Churchill and Roosevelt had their differences. They were keen observers of each other's blind spots and shortcomings, if not always their own. And they were hard-headed about their ability to remake the world. But what joined the fates of these two men at that particular moment in history was not simply a shared interest in victory on the battlefield. It was a shared belief in the ultimate triumph of human freedom and human dignity. A conviction that we have a say in how this story ends. This conviction lives on in their people today. The challenges we face are great. The work before us is hard. But we have come through a difficult decade, and whenever the tests and trials ahead may seem too big or too many, let us turn to their example and the words that Churchill spoke on the day that Europe was freed. In the long years to come, not only will the people of this island, but the world, wherever the bird of freedom chirps in the human heart, look back to what we've done, and they will say, do not despair, do not yield, march straight forward. With courage and purpose, with humility and with hope, with faith in the promise of tomorrow, let us march straight forward, together, enduring allies, in the cause of a world that is more peaceful, more prosperous, and more just. Thank you very much.
been listening to President Obama there in Westminster Hall. I'm Suzanne Muldoon in Atlanta. Welcome back to our special coverage of President Obama's big address to Britain's Parliament. Here to help sum up the speech, we have a full team. Our Wolf Blitzer and Candy Crowley in Washington, Richard Quest at 10 Downing Street, London, and Zane Burgee at our London Bureau. I want to start off first with your impressions, Wolf. I know that this was a speech, a historic speech. One of the things that stood out for me was that he really did reset. He talked about a new world order, that you had China, Brazil, India, these kinds of powers that have emerged, but it wasn't a zero-sum game, that it did not mean the United States and United Kingdom were diminished in any way, but had a new responsibility to the world to bring forward democracy, to make sure that economies were stable. What struck you?
You know, a lot of the special relationship we've been talking about between the U.S. and the U.K., to be sure, but I was struck by some of the words he said on Afghanistan, specifically when he spoke about this being a moment where the U.S. and its NATO allies in Afghanistan are preparing to turn a corner. The U.S. obviously is getting ready to begin some sort of withdrawal from Afghanistan. But as you know, Suzanne, and a lot of our viewers know as well, the United States would like to accelerate. The Obama administration would like to get out of Afghanistan, especially now that bin Laden has been killed and removed. So there's no doubt that there may be an opportunity for the U.S. to do in Afghanistan what it's doing in Iraq right now, declare victory basically, and come home. I wonder if Candy Crowley, who's here with us, if she agrees.
Absolutely, I do. I mean, I think there's a couple of things that really struck me, and the first one is that with a good editor and some slicing and dicing, this is the Obama campaign for re-election because it touches on the optimism. Hey, we've turned a corner. Let's remember the first trip he took to Europe, the economy was a mess. People were really worried about it. And what did we hear? And this is the second thing that really occurs to me about why he gave this speech, and that is that we are still relevant speech, because the last time, or the first time he was in Europe, it was all about, well, maybe democracy and capitalism doesn't work that well. Look at the U.S. economy. It's terrible. The U.S. is in a mess in Afghanistan. And he's making the argument that the U.S., that this, transatlantic alliance between the U.S. and Britain and Europe, for that matter, remains kind of the cornerstone of both the engine of the economy globally as well as security. And that's what, it just seemed to me a we are relevant speech based on what he sees as an optimistic view of what's going, including getting out of Afghanistan, Iraq, etc.
Richard Quest in London, what did you think?
This was a speech about leadership. It was an important address in which he reaffirmed that no matter whether there is a shift of economic power taking place from west to east, the relevance of the transatlantic alliance, in the president's word, is indispensable. He said the decline of influence and those who said it was taking place was wrong. Their leadership has not passed. He talked about the struggle, that they can and must continue to support those who struggle. So what I take from this as being the president setting out very firmly, Wolf, that anybody who says the old guard is dead and buried and that all hail the new emerging markets needs to think again.
I want to bring in our Zane Burgee as well, because Zane, one of the things that I heard that was striking was that you always heard a criticism of President Bush moving forward in Iraq and imposing this idea of imposing a U.S. will on the rest of the world. And we heard President Obama say we will proceed with humility and the knowledge that we cannot dictate outcomes abroad. Ultimately, freedom must be won by the people themselves, not imposed from without. Did that ring true? Did that seem to have a real impact from where you sit?
Yes, absolutely it does, because many of the Bush years people here saw as characterized by arrogance, and this is a different tone, characterized and articulated with a lot more humility here. I thought that the British, they love a good speech, and this was it. It was ornate, it was rhetorical, it was eloquent, and it was filled with the kind of dazzle that people have come to expect from President Barack Obama. I had three observations. The first point was on the Middle East. He talked about how the US and the UK were united in support for a secure Israel and Palestine. That was it, just one line. Overall, yes, that's the goal, but the reality is that there is daylight on that topic. The Palestinians want to go to the UN. They want to declare a state independently in September. Britain's likely to support a move like that. The US, no way. Also, Britain is more willing to talk to Hamas or even think about including them. For the US, that's a non-starter.